Here, recording. Okay, so welcome everybody to the second talk in our Homegrown Scientist speaker series. My name is Stephanie. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the president of Advancing Women in Science, which is a student group on campus that basically works in different ways to increase the representation of underrepresented groups in the sciences and in STEM broadly. And today we are here with Randi and Tabitha, who are going to tell us their stories as individuals who are pursuing careers in STEM and who did their undergraduate degrees in STEM. This speaker series is sponsored by Advancing Women in Science, but also the departments of Anthropology, Biology, Psychology, and Earth and Planetary Sciences. So thank you to them. If you are totally unfamiliar with our group, I will drop into the chat our email, Facebook page, and Twitter, and you can get connected with us. We do have a listserv where we put out emails, not very often, maybe weekly, just letting you know what kind of events we have going on. So if you're not on our listserv, send me an email and I will put you on our listserv. So welcome everybody, and I'm not going to spend time introducing Tabitha and Randi because they're each going to introduce themselves. So I will turn it over to you. Tabitha, do you want to get us started?
Sure thing. Just want to say first, thank you to Stephanie, like giving me pep talk emails and stuff like that before this, and the whole group, and Gabrielle, who even invited me to this, this opportunity. So as we're talking about women in science, it just makes the intersection, it's a perfect segue for my experience of oh my gosh, when I grow up, what things are gonna be like. And so this moment has taken a long time to come to fruition. And even though it might seem like a small piece, I hope that if I can give you any advice, is just be grateful for every moment, every challenge, every jewel. So yeah, just all of the gratitude and thanks. Also to my community engagement family, the Community Engagement Center at UNM, constantly working hard and just bringing people into spaces and connecting them with resources that they usually wouldn't have. And just the amount of humility that they do it with has definitely changed my life. And of course, my associate director, Alicia, she's not on yet, but I just want to thank all of them. So I'm huge in gratitude. I could go on and on, but I just want to thank everyone who made it easier for me to be here and speak. As you might have read my bio, being from New Mexico, specifically Alamogordo, New Mexico, Alamogordo Tigers. My father brought us there by way of the military. He was stationed at Fort Bliss. He met my mom at a club in El Paso, and then when he retired, they got married, and he worked at White Sands Missile Range until he retired. So growing up in Alamogordo, it's a small town. As you may know, New Mexico has a current recorded population for people who identify as Black as less than 3%, or between 3 and 4%. And in Alamogordo, it's of course even smaller than that. And there just wasn't, to be honest, this cliche word of representation. And of course, when you're 8 years old, you don't know what representation is. You don't know the effect that it's having on your life. But as I began to grow up, I knew that I was just I just loved to learn. I was good at learning in the academic sense. I didn't really see myself as someone who wasn't good at learning for most, my younger part of my childhood. And once I got into high school, looking back, I could see that there was definitely differential treatment. I definitely began to feel how I started to shift and shape the way that I entered into spaces depending on who was there. Um, One thing is that with all of this like love for learning, I also was extremely overweight as a child. I still am. I reached almost 400 pounds at one time. And so all of the social things that entails for children and teenagers and all of those things was happening. And so I one, I was fat. Two, I was extremely tall. And three, I was Black and I was dark skinned. So I was very visibly different from everyone everywhere I went. So again, going into those spaces, I felt myself start to not talk as much or feel like I had to overcompensate or that I didn't belong or the way that I spoke just didn't fit. So that was in high school. I went on through the lottery scholarship, as most of you might be familiar with, to UNM. And I spent my first semester there, and it was incredibly hard for me. I remember I couldn't fit in the desk. I remember hiding and hiding to eat and not wanting to eat in front of other people. I remember people vocally and very publicly making fun of me for my size. And at the time, my mom did get sick and I did move home, but it was like that was the perfect out. That was the perfect reason to say I'm going to quit. Yeah, so that happened, and that was back in 2006. I'm a non-traditional student, and there was many times that I attempted to come back to school, and every time I just couldn't deal with. At the time, I thought like it was definitely a daily battle for me to come to school and realize how the desk pinched my fat, or realize that my clothes didn't fit in the way, or have nervousness in speaking up. And that, along with being dark skinned, being visibly Black, those are two intersections of my identity that are still things that I'm working through and learning how to navigate. So fast forward to last December, through the CEC. Going back, I worked at Kirtland, in the Kirtland neighborhood, at Thomasville Community Center, in their after school program. That changed my life. I knew that I wanted to work with communities and like kept coming back to it in different ways. When I got back to CNM, I saw that the same organization that I was working for was hiring. The same people were there 10 years later. They said they remembered me. And from there, they helped me to make a community. They have supported me so much. Through their encouragement, their constant mentoring, all women of color, mostly women from places outside of the United States, but definitely giving strong intellectual and also compassionate advice, have helped me to graduate last December in 2009 with my Bachelor of Science, and also with the highest of honors with the Summa Cum Laude. And just like saying that out is like, whew. I'm a crybaby, by the way. I'm just very grateful. And they continue to support me and they just continue to be there. And what I have learned most from them is that the importance of keeping your essence in whatever dreams you reach for. I worked in a lab for about a year, in a psych lab at UNM. And if it wasn't for their guidance of the days where I felt like I didn't fit in or that I couldn't articulate things, they always had a kind word. And yeah, so that's me now. I graduated. I'm in my process of looking for grad schools, and I'm strongly leaning towards a combined degree of social work and public health. And I just believe that that's going to be my pathway, both to being able to affect change in our communities and also to being effective on the policy level, which is also important. So that's what I want to end with. And yeah.
Thank you, Tabitha. That was so insightful, and it's just like we're all so thankful to just like have you in this space. So thank you. And I'm sure that everyone's looking forward to being able to ask you some questions in a few minutes. But I'm going to turn it over to Randi right now just to introduce herself before we get into sort of the more question discussion period.
Thanks, Tabitha. That was really nice to hear your story. You made me cry a little too, which might be why Stephanie paired us up, is because I think I'm also a little emotional too. So, but I'm Randi. I grew up in Belen, New Mexico, and that's about 30 minutes south of Albuquerque. And there was not a lot of academia was in my high school. It was mostly just get the girls graduated, get the boys graduated, and then they can figure it out on their own. I was a graduating senior, and no one even talked to me about going to college. I've never met my counselor until the last week I was graduating, and they wanted to make sure all my credits were there. But other than that, it was up to me to figure out what it was, and I thought my safest bet was going to UNM because there was a lottery scholarship, and how can they say no to me? I was going to get in. That's what everyone kept saying. And so it was hard. My going to UNM was hard. I had no experience. I didn't know anyone that was in college. I didn't know how to pay for it or make ends meet while I was in school or balance my time between working a lot of jobs and studying. And so I never really got the lottery scholarship because I lost it before I was ever able to even to try to do school. So I started at UNM going into architecture, but then my advisor told me that if I majored in architecture, I would never find a job. So I was like, oh, okay, well, where can I get a job? And they told me you need a major in electrical engineering. So that's the classes they started putting me in. And so that's what I tried to do. And I wasn't prepared for the math or the amount of work that went into these classes. And my first time I ever took a computer science class was in C++. And it was really hard. And I didn't know how to ask for help. And my TA was an overstressed graduate student, which now I understand why they're so stressed. But, you know, he had a young family and he just really didn't have time to sit there with me every single day to work through whatever coding was. I didn't know what I was doing. And at the time, there was no peer tutoring. So I really had no idea who to talk to. And that was the semester I dropped out of UNM. And so I got a job as a receptionist at UNMH. And then I realized that doctors are doing research, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I kept asking them what they were doing and what does that mean? Why are your mice green? What is this? And so they were like, well, if you're interested in this, why don't you go ahead and, you know, they let me go see their lab, and then they didn't let me do any work in the lab. I just got to see it. And then they let me participate in any way I could from the desk. It was mostly just doing their literature searches for them. So then I started reading these papers and I started asking more questions. And then finally they got tired of me asking them questions, and they said, okay, you need to go back to school. You have too many questions to be my receptionist. It's time to go learn this. So they made an appointment for me to meet one of their professors that they collaborated with. And so I met with them and they said, you know, if you have an interest in this, why don't you just come back to school? You know, biochemistry seems to be your field that you're interested in. And then I started school. And I took to it. I learned everything in the lab that I needed to to be successful in my life. I learned how to manage time. I learned how to study. I learned how to ask questions and not be afraid to ask questions. And ask questions, then all of a sudden my professor was like, well, we don't know that yet. That's why we're researching. I didn't know that. I thought everything was just known. And so then they got me into the undergrad honors program for biochem. And I didn't know it was a competition. I just thought I was going to present at the end of the year. And yeah, I won, which was surprising because I didn't know that my research was that important, or maybe that I was that good at it. But so I graduated with my bachelor's of science in biochem. I took a year off between grad school, and I was a lab tech, and I got more experience in the lab. And then I started my master's at the BSGP on North Campus, the Biomedical Sciences. And by the time I graduated with my master's in 2 years, I was a co-author in 13 publications. And so then I worked another year after that with my master's, and I decided I wanted to see what was outside of academia. And I went to work for the state for forensic toxicology. And that was a hard transition because a lot of my friends that were in academia didn't like that people were leaving academia. And so one of the hardest challenges was people calling me a sellout because I left academia. And I've even had professors tell me that there's no way you can ever come back. And so I'm back. And I found a really great mentor in computer science, and he has a lab in biomedical engineering. And really, I was only coming back to school to learn how to code because the jobs that I saw needed a coding experience. I never thought I was going to be encouraged to get a PhD in biomedical engineering, and I certainly never thought that my professor would be supportive of me getting a master's in computer science along the way. But there are people who really do believe in you from the jump and will put their money behind you, and that's really saying something because he didn't know me. I walked into his office and was like, hey, can I learn this? And he was like, I guess. And I never left, and then he brought me on, so. And that's my story. And I think if I could give myself advice when I was coming into this adventure, it would be to, like Holly said last time, open. I would be patient, work hard, and do the readings. So, and that's my story. And I would really like if anyone had questions with grad school or what they would want to do. I love helping people find labs or connections or anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randi. Another insightful story. It's always, I love this speaker series. I'm learning so much. So thank you both. I think that I will open up for questions. So everybody in the audience, if you have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself, or if somebody's talking, you can use the raise hand function, and then I'll try to keep track of sort of who's next and call on you. But you can just unmute yourself to ask your question, or if you can't use the audio, you can just type it into the chat and I will relay the questions for you.
Randi, I just want to say that like that like conversation with like with Dr. Lakin sounds like the most thing he would say ever. Can I do this? I guess.
Yes. He's definitely the kind of person who will let people weed themselves out. So he said if you weren't interested, you would have been gone within the first few weeks. So you didn't leave.
Tabitha, this is me giving you a hug.
Oh my gosh, Holly, your face makes me so happy.
I just absolutely love you, and I just sent you a Facebook request like yesterday, and I was like, I hope she accepts it.
It's done.
I didn't even hear your story. I just think you're great, and I really enjoy listening to you. And when I look at you, I see a superstar. And I think that's because of all of the work that you've done, right? Like you have persevered, you have been resilient. Tenacious is the word I was thinking of, where you're just like, I want to do this thing, and now you're doing it. So I'm very grateful to you for sharing your story with us today.
Sorry, thank you for creating the space. I think that I think on paper it doesn't really seem powerful, but I think the power of like giving space for stories, which I've learned through the Community Engagement Center and all the communities that we've worked with, and just through Megan and Eric, who are also in the line too. We've just had really incredible connections, and I guess that's where my gratitude is us just trying to make more spaces to talk and connect with each other.
Well, thanks to Advancing Women in Science for setting this up, or we might not have met.
Yay. Manisha, I can see you with the hand raised. Can you, you can mic off.
Yeah.
There you go. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to both of you for your stories. I would share video if I weren't in bed, but you know, you guys have had such powerful stories. I teared up too. And I just want to say, like, Randi, listening to some of the things that you had to say, we had very similar, I think, starts at UNM. I also lost the lottery because I didn't stay after my first a couple of years. You know, I had no guidance in my high school either. And same thing, they didn't make sure we had graduation credits or even requirements. We didn't meet requirements for admission into university. So like our high school didn't require like languages, and UNM requires you to have a language credit. So stuff like that, a lot of students were really scrambling for, and just not having that guidance. And then myself being first generation university student, kind of having to muddle through everything on my own and figure out what exactly is happening. Same thing with me at one point when I chose anthropology. I didn't know I had to choose a minor, and they chose it for me. So I like, you know, I hear you, I see you, I get it, man. But what I want to ask is, if you were going to give some advice to someone who is entering into university completely blindsided like that, like, you know, Tabitha mentioned some great resources that have helped guide her through it. You know, is there something that you found either like on campus or off campus, or even with a group like Advancing Women in Science, something like that, where you could direct other students to go so that they felt like they were being set up for success for their education?
Yeah, I think I would point them to maybe I've never heard of the Community Engagement Center that Tabitha was talking about. I would point them to that. I just learned about that today. My undergrad, I spent the entire time without having like my people. I didn't find that until now when I came back to school. And I came back to school in the weirdest class that no one should ever come back to school in. And I think I made friends in that class that felt bad for me, and they just like took me under their wing. And those are my people now, and they're my support. And one of those people is Alicia, and Alicia has introduced me into these organizations and has pointed me to more resources. So I have a hard time pointing people to resources, but I do encourage them to speak with their classmates and not be so shy. Because if I hadn't spoken with Alicia, or if I was just shut down, I would have dropped out again. But I think that another thing or another resource would be if they were interested in a subject. I'm definitely the kind of person that if you don't respond to my emails, I'll start calling. And if you don't answer my phone calls, I can look up where your office is and I'll show up and I'll hang out outside your door until you talk to me. That's really how things work for me. I guess it's harder to say no to me in person than it is just to ignore me digitally. But if that comes down to it, that's the advice I give people is don't take no for an answer. If they don't respond to you, just show up at their door and hang out until they show up. And then they really don't know what to say, and usually they'll give you what you want. So if you have a professor, and that's what I did to get into my labs, is I will show up and I will bug you until you let me in the lab. So I can help you find connections to and help you with someone maybe that I know if you're interested in getting in the lab or somewhere, and that's really the only resource I can help with. Does that help?
Oh, yeah, yeah, totally. I just, meant for anyone coming in and stuff that can help them better navigate, their time at university, especially for such a diverse range of types of people and voices. I mean, it can be difficult to figure out where you belong.
Tabitha,
So,
did you want
thank
to chime in on that as well? Yeah, go ahead.
yes.
This is really big for me, and I'm still figuring this out. But knowing who you are and making that the top goal, and I feel like so many resources start to come along as you start to center your own identity and what's important to you, and the less burnout there is, the less like not taking care of yourself. And I know I know self-care is so cliche, but in like this super capitalistic world where like everyone is a product, everything you do is a product, like just taking the time to rehumanize yourself and knowing that you have inherent value, I think. And so going back to that, for me personally, and how I identify as being a Black woman, going around women of color who redirected me to literature that helped me with my identity and the experiences that I was having was like the number one resource for me. And that was the Community Engagement Center, but for other people, it might be a POC centered or Black, whatever your identity is centered group, or people who get you who are doing the same thing.
Awesome. We have a question from Monique next. You can go ahead, Monique.
Oh, I'm muted. Okay. Hi, everyone. I did just want to say that this series so far has been very inspiring. I feel like so many of the things that are being said are things that I've always like thought and gone through. And every time I talk to someone, like no one could relate to me. And like seeing the series and so many women, like especially Tabitha, like so many of the things that you said, I personally went through as well. And I still continue to go through in college. And it's so weird because my parents also met in a club in El Paso. But I wanted to ask, how can you incorporate community and science to benefit overlooked communities? Because that's really what I want to do. I'm currently a geology major, so I really want to do community work and be able to like fuse those two together, because a lot of the times those communities are, science isn't really a big thing that's talked about.
First of all, thank you. It's so, yeah. I just, I'm sorry. So I just, to answer your question that you have is that I'm not, some of the other ladies can give you very specific details about that, but I think that putting communities at the center of the projects, if you're saying that you want to go into geology, pinpointing the community you want to work with and asking, is geology or a geology focused research project really going to benefit these people? Is this what they want? Like, is this going to look good on headlines? Are they going to be pushed out of the resources that come from this? And then also, again, I can encourage you to get involved with service groups. I know I keep plugging the Community Engagement Center, but we've worked really hard to make partnerships with a lot of people, and like us trying to make partners with people who are interested in the same thing. We don't specifically have any geology labs, but I think putting your heart first, going into communities and saying, I want to get to know you more. I want to find out your needs first, and then see what project we can come up with, or this is what I have. Does it sync up with what you need?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Randy, did you want to chime in on that one as well?
I think that's really great advice from Tabitha. I think that's the approach that I would do. The outreach that I've done is kind of just make myself available to my old high school, and I try to engage with the alternative high schools around New Mexico, and just give them like me as a resource if they have anyone coming to questions that have any students that have questions. I would be more than happy to be that person if they don't have anyone in their field that they can talk to. If I've also am trying to get more professors to be open to and doing the paperwork to bring high school students in, or people in the community that may want to be in research. Because there are some professors that maybe don't want high school students or people in the community coming into the lab, or maybe UNM has rules against it. But just letting them know that this research is going on in their community, and if you would like to participate, I'm here to see in any way how I can help you get involved. But I think Holly had more advice too for that.
Yeah, Monique, are you at UNM?
Yeah, I am. And
Okay.
I have seen you before. I think I've seen you multiple times, or even taken a class with you, which is crazy.
What
Yeah,
class? Was it
I don't
like
know.
exploring the solar system?
Yes, that's probably the one. Yeah.
I think that's the only class I've taken in EPS. Students didn't really talk to each other. They just showed up, listened to lecture, and left. So that's why I
Yes.
guess that was our shared class. But what I was going to say first to answer your question is something that I've learned in grad school is, it's a long story, but I'm in a program that's called the Environmental Studies Program. And it combines like physical science and social science. So there are people that are working in, like I study the exchange of carbon dioxide between the ocean and the atmosphere, but I also experiment with how to communicate my science to people that don't study the climate system. And then there are people that study like the behavior of coyotes. And there are people that study how, if big banks ever divested from fossil fuel money, how would that ever happen, right? And we're all in the same program. And so I would encourage you to look at that for graduate school. I think some schools, some universities call it environmental science. Where I am, it's environmental studies. So maybe look at both. And then there are more earth science departments that are starting to bring in the social component, social science component, especially when it comes to climate change, which, I mean, come on, we're the reason for the rapidly changing climate, so we need to be included in the science about what to do about it. So I think that's pretty great. So you're definitely coming into it at the right time. But I definitely spent, I was in EPS for 2 years, and I definitely was confused and frustrated by how much people were so focused on how Earth works without including the human component. And we are part of Earth. So that was very confusing to me. And then one other thing I was going to say was Laura Crossy, who is super busy if you see her in the hallway, but she's the director for the Alliance for Minority Participation. And so if you haven't connected with her, I'm happy to introduce you, but she's got funding for research, but she's also a good mentor. She's the one that I would call and go and talk to on the days when I just needed to cry. Like when I took my GRE, she's the one that I went to talk to. And so I call her my college godmother because she connected me with my first research mentor at UNM, which has gotten me to where I am today. So she's vested. And I think too, getting back to Tabitha for just a second, for lab groups in the geology department, I would recommend Laura Crossy because she does frequently have undergraduate and graduate students of color, which I appreciate about her. And you can't say that very often in the Earth and Planetary Sciences department. And then one other professor, Monique, is Aurora Poon. She teaches.
I love Aurora and I love Laura. Yeah.
Like if you email her and set up a one-on-one, she'll chat for like as long as you want.
Mm-hmm.
She's the other one I used to always go to.
Thank you so much for the comments.
Yeah, we should talk more.
Yes, I will email you.
So we have a question from Gabrielle. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Hey y'all. Thank you for sharing your stories. I love to hear from you. So thank you for sharing your experiences. Both of you shared that you took some time away from school. So my question kind of leads to that experience of what you used the time, how you utilized it, and when you knew you were ready to go back and how you re-engaged. However you want to take that, personal, professional, scholarship-wise, financial. Yeah, but that's kind of the prompt, is how you used your time away and when you knew you were coming back.
Why doesn't Tabitha? Oh, Randy, I was like, somebody
I
talk.
don't know what to do. So I took my time away the first time because I thought I was done with school. But once I graduated with my bachelor's, I took that year off to decide if I wanted. I had already been working in the lab and I was happy working in the lab. So I didn't know if I wanted to be a professor or if I just wanted to advance my education to be, just to have the master's degree in the lab, to qualify for more like bench positions. So I got the master's, and then after that, I was able to get a promotion. So I went from a research tech to a research scientist. And after that, it was kind of like, maybe I want to see what is outside of academia. And I also wanted to do something more involved with my community. And the New Mexico Department of Health has the scientific labs division. It's like this really nice building on the corner of I-25 and I-40 almost. No one ever notices it, but that's where they do their science. And so I went there, and it was that's what I spent my time off doing, was working there and seeing how that works. And then I decided I do have more research questions. I'm not satisfied just doing standard operating procedures. I had questions, and whenever you have an SOP, it's not up for discussion, and I didn't like that. So that was when I decided to maybe do another job where I could have more creativity with research, or go back to school and maybe pursue a PhD. And after seeing what the jobs required, I knew I needed to get some programming experience, and that was what I wanted to do with computer science. But then my professor encouraged me to go into the PhD program, and that was also because I kept asking a lot of questions, and he said that maybe I could turn those questions into a dissertation. So and now I'm working on that, and I really do, I think I am cut out for academia. So
Yeah, Randy, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really interesting, like the ways we change and think of and see ourselves. To be honest, like when I left in 2006, I had no hope that I would go back to college. I didn't see myself as like it was my worst nightmare to get to like be out of school. Like I didn't realize at the time that the high school that I graduated from like severely under-equipped me. Like I didn't realize I had no study skills. I just didn't have the skills that I thought I needed to succeed, and I didn't know how to seek those out. And I had a lot of self-blame for that. In the time when I was gone, I actually I was married during that time, and I'm no longer in that relationship. And I went through a lot of challenges. I went through times where I didn't have a home or a place to live. So I would love to say that I took the time to work on other things. The only thing at the time was learning and watching a whole bunch of TED Talks, and watching and reading a whole bunch of books that I was interested in, and watching a whole bunch of YouTube videos and getting the skills. And then honestly, for me, it took hitting rock bottom to say, like, either I'm going to continue to work these jobs where I know I'm more intelligent or that I give input, and I need to buckle down and get this degree. Like, it was survival for me, and I'm very grateful for those times. And the thing is, like, I hate to be the Black person who had to be resilient to get back to college. Like, that's the story that I don't want to continue to happen. Like, so I think that's why these spaces are really important. Like, just if that is your story and that happens, that doesn't make you any less, but that's who I am, and that's my story. And hopefully we can change that by having these conversations. So I hope that answered the question.
That was a great answer, Tabitha. Thank you. Laura, we have a question from Laura next.
Hello, thank you again, ladies, both for sharing your stories. You're so inspiring, so amazing. I would like to hear a little bit about what you dream in, say, 5 years. Like, what are you dreaming of? What are you scheming up? Like, what let's pretend there's no COVID. So, like, sky, like, no pandemic, right? We can still throw in socioeconomic downturn and all those other things that are happening. But if there was not a pandemic, and if you could travel, like, what communities do you want to work with? And also, Tabitha, like, period to what you just said about finding out what your communities need and then tailoring your research to your community. Like, that's so good, so brilliant and beautiful. I was just like, wow, yes, yes, truth. So anyway, I would love to hear that, like, what your dreams are. Just like allowing the sky to be the limit, where you would want to see yourself. Or yourselves, both of you, both Randi and Tabitha.
Tabitha, you're going first because no one's opening their mic.
Okay, so in 5 years from now, academically, I see myself either having completed my graduate level or completed a combined MSW and public health master's, and or in the middle of a psychology doctorate. I'm leaning towards social work and public health because the lab situation with psych, I'm not really, like, in love with right now. And with that degree, I would love to, like, do therapy sessions and just in gardens, and just continue to inform therapies and from, like, community lenses. I apologize. I get really excited, so my words aren't coming as quickly as I want. I wanted to go the psychology route because I'm very passionate about creating creating new treatment modalities, and also assessments for eating disorders, specifically that focus on people who identify as being Black or Indigenous, especially us knowing the food deserts, or as we're now saying, food apartheid that's happening in our communities. So I just want to continue being a part of that. And honestly, I'm living my dream life. Like, it just keeps getting better. And, like, so any, like, thing that adds onto that is amazing. But those are, like, huge things, like being a part, continuing to open more gardens, continuing to have more places for people to heal in the ways that's best for them. Yeah, and if we want to call that science, that's cool too. Yeah.
Thanks, Tabitha. I do always like to go outside when I'm super stressed and from staring at a computer or I can't understand one of these problems. I always want to go like do my homework outside because it makes me feel better. I think in 5 years for me, I'm hopefully wrapping up my postdoc. Um, I'm still unsure where that would be in. I'm still learning a lot about my interests in biology and combining that with computer science. Um, but there are a lot of really, really neat opportunities with synthetic biology and systems biology that I have an interest in. And hopefully being able to mentor more girls in STEM and helping them get into labs and making good connections in grad school and stuff. I think I'll always have that around. um, but also, if I want to be super selfish, I really want to get a faculty offer at University of Washington, and that's really what I'm hoping for. Just putting it out there because the universe is here too.
That's awesome. Laura, you can go ahead with your follow-up question.
Okay, so Randy just sort of answered my follow-up question, which I wasn't 100% sure, both for Randy and Tabitha, where you would want to wind up ultimately, if it would be Albuquerque, if it would be Alamogordo, or in Randy's case, you said you were from Limey, New Mexico?
I'm from Belen.
Belen, I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine.
Like, I screwed that up, but
Yeah.
whether it would be in your own home communities or elsewhere. And also, Tabitha, I work on colonialism and foodways and how colonialism disrupted indigenous and native and like local food systems. So we should talk after this. That would be wonderful. If you have time, I'm like, if you got a little, space, I would appreciate that. But yeah, and also again, follow up for Randy is why Washington, and yeah, can you talk a little bit about like why you want to be where you see yourself being and who you're going to be working with?
So our group is collaborating with another group from the University of Washington. And so the research there is a huge opportunity for me to maybe just try something new outside of New Mexico. I lived there briefly before I had to move back for a family emergency, and that's when I took the opportunity to come back to school. And my husband really loves it out there, and he would like to move there. And I think we both seeing us spending some time there. I don't ever feel that I could ever leave New Mexico completely. Like, this is home. And this is where I've seen my struggle happen, and I think all of us have seen that happen here. And there's no way I could turn my back on my community. And whether I'm here or anywhere else, this will always be my top priority of who I'm going to help. This will always be my community. And so whatever success I make somewhere else, it will always come back to Belen. I will always help the girls from Belen struggling to see what they want to do, or the girls who went to alternative high school, or anyone who feels like they may not be successful because they don't know anyone, or they just don't know the ropes or even who to ask. And yeah, I could never just like abandon this ever. So
And I really appreciate Randy's like connection to Belen, and how passionate she is about it. Um, I think for me, I've gone back and forth. I can't see myself living in Alamogordo for an extended period of time, for things that for like I don't know. I don't know if Alamogordo would be that. I have thought about it, and I would have to I think I would have to be stable in Albuquerque or somewhere else and bring the resources back. I don't think that I have the resources and skills to affect change in the way that needs to be affected. I think that in my dreams, I would live in Amsterdam, and that's a long story. My best friend of almost 27 years now lives there, and she's also Dutch, and I'm extremely close to her. But also, I know that there's way more need here. Also, sorry, my friend Siobhan is also on the line too. Sorry, I don't know. Like, I think of Houston because I have family there, and I think, to be honest, like, that's my dilemma as like a Black scholar and knowing the history of this country. I'm like, where would I fit in? Like, would I just be constantly be doing work? Like, what could be home? And yeah, I don't know. I could see myself in Houston, New Orleans, St. Louis. Yeah, I don't know yet.
Thank you both so much for sharing.
I don't see anybody else's hands raised at the moment, but I have a question because you both have quite like non-traditional paths in terms of leaving and coming back and changing your mind. And so I'm starting to realize that that seems to be a theme in our speaker series, actually, and I didn't notice that. But it seems like it's actually really common, and I know that like statistically it's really common at UNM to be a non-traditional student, and yet often non-traditional students feel the most sort of like not at home and not fitting into the community. So I guess my question for you is sort of what advice you have for those non-traditional students out there who are maybe older, maybe they've come from a different background, but you both mentioned like the importance of finding your community. So obviously, you know, like once you've both described sort of once you found that community, how much it helped you, but like what kind of really practical actions would you recommend, or what helped you in terms of like finding that community and like finding it in yourself to reach out and find that community?
I say until you find that community, if you have access to it, I encourage you to utilize therapy services because it can be really hard. And if you're from a non-traditional setting, you may not have people around you who understand or have the strength to hear your story. So therapy in the meantime. What else was I going to say? And also broadening who you see as your community. I think when I came back to Albuquerque from living in Denver, I was just like, oh my God, I'm too old. All of these like young people, like I'm like, they're gonna think I'm trying to be cool. Like all these things. I had so many like this major imposter syndrome. And like now I've met so many different people, younger than me, older than me, from different backgrounds. And so, yeah, just being open to who you call your community is also helpful.
I agree with Tabitha. The imposter syndrome was really bad coming back to school, because I came back in a field I knew nothing about, and everyone in my class knew I knew nothing about it. And then I met my community and my people, and they've helped me with everything. And I agree that if you are having a hard time, we have SHAC, we have counseling as a student that you should take advantage of. And just making sure that you soldier through some of this stuff. It is going to be hard, but if you took a choice to come back, or you made a decision to come back to school or start school as a non-traditional student, you're already halfway there. You believed in yourself enough to come here to start this, and that is, just keep remembering why you started. If you have to write it down on a sticky note and put it on your monitor so you stare at it every single time when you want to quit, it's going to help you. But if you came back and you took the steps to get into school, you're halfway there. You just need to use that to soldier through it, and that's really it. And then I think people will take notice of your hard work, and maybe that'll attract the type of people you want in your life.
That is great. Great advice from both of you. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to make a final call for questions. We have 2 minutes left. Oh yeah, Ashley says she would like to tack on to this question. Go for it, Ashley. Would love to hear what you have to add.
Okay, so I didn't come back as a non-traditional student, but I did leave the original place I did my undergrad, which was like my dream place to go to school, and I realized that it wasn't working out. I moved to UNM on like a whim. I was like failing all of my classes at my original school, and UNM was like, sure, you can come here. Also, we'll throw away your old GPA. Like, you can just start over and it's fine. And like coming here and like trying to find community, I think one of the things that was really important for me was similar to what Tabitha said, like looking outside of what you think it's going to be. So like one of the main places that I really started to find like a healthy community, because you've also got to find a good one, right? Like you can find communities that are actually just toxic for you and make everything harder. And you can get kind of attached to those. But like one of the good communities I found was Advancing Women in Science. Like I had spoken at like an event or something, and the president at the time, I don't remember, I think her name was Andrea, I don't remember, came up to me after the event and was like, hey, you look like a kid who needs some help. We're gonna go have a meeting at this restaurant to like talk about chartering this organization. Like, you want to come? And like I found like all these lovely people. Like Stephanie was there and Laura was there, and it was great. And I found a bunch of grad students who do nothing related to what I do. And they were just like, you guys were so supportive and like ready to take on this little weird computer science student who wasn't doing anything that you were doing, but you were so encouraging and like tried to get me as many resources as you could and tried to get me opportunities and like made me like go and put myself out there. And like, yeah, and that's like a lot of why I am where I am now, which you can hear about in April. But like, I just like, it was community isn't always where you think it's gonna be. Like I know a lot of the people that Randi is talking about, but I don't have like a strong connection to them in the same way as I do to the people in AWS. They're great people. I don't mean to sound like they're not great.
Thanks, Ashley. Such nice things to hear. I will wrap it up on that note and say thank you again to Tabitha and Randi. You guys are role models. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences with everybody. I think it's been a very fulfilling hour for everybody here. So thank you so much. And we will be back in a month with 2 more speakers. So stay tuned, and I will drop into the chat again our email address. Let me do that in a second. So that if you are not on our listserv and you don't have the calendar of events for us, you can be sure to get on our listserv. Thanks again, Tabitha and Randi, so much for your time, and everybody have a good day.